All right, we are recording.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today is March 25th, and this is the Joint Capital Planning Committee on what may be our last meeting. We'll see if we get through a report. My first order of business, seeing that everyone is here, is to make sure everyone can hear and be heard. So I'm just going to call out your names as I see you on the screen. Eugene,
Yes.
Lee,
Yes.
Jill,
Yes.
Bridget,
Yes.
Deborah,
Hi.
and Andy.
Yes.
So everyone is here. So I thought, I got a few questions over the weekend on exactly how much money we have to spend, um, and how that aligns with the Excel spreadsheets. So to the extent people want to go quickly through the overall table, we could start with that. But the main thing, what I was hoping we would do is focus first on FY27, the first year, and are there any other changes that anyone wants to make that are substantive? Right now, we've got because of what Sean did, was able to close some accounts and correct the debt assessments because he's been able to bring some projects in at lowest interest rates. It freed up enough money to fully fund the Crocker Farm playground. So instead of it going into debt, it's now cash, and to provide another 375,000 for roads. So he penciled those in because the committee had indicated we wanted to do both of those, but it was a big increase in roads. And that's in the Excel sheet already that he showed last time a week ago, but it was a really quick rundown. So it was a combination of the 175 and the 375. And we're now looking at a $9,000 surplus on FY27. So I wanted to just start out with if anyone needs a run through on the big picture, but then zero in on FY27 on any other changes that people want to discuss. And then, as you saw in the draft, I went ahead and talked about the next 4 years as being in big deficits and where you might be able to find the money, and made some other statements. So that's a draft report, and Sean can pull the report up on the screen and we can be doing real-time edits. And he's going to go back, and he's already started looking at it. Any place the numbers I put in weren't quite right, he's going to fix those. So in terms of I didn't add right, or I pulled a number from an old spreadsheet rather than a new spreadsheet. So people can say, do you want the overview or do you want to go right into the FY27 budgets? And is there anything you want to recommend a change in the projects that we're looking at? Should we start just with any recommended changes? I'm just looking at wherever you want to start. You have a draft report that hopefully we get through today and we vote it out, other than minor final edits, that we're finished and we don't have to meet next week. Bridget.
Hey, Kathy, I would love for you just to look at that one sheet that gives us the overview. Maybe Sean can do it at the beginning because you've got that 10.5, and I read
Sure.
all the emails this weekend, and then at the end we've got six, and I just love to fully grasp how the numbers go, and then I think
Okay.
we have some proposals, but yeah.
Okay. So Sean, that's the summary table. Aha. And he's got the true false numbers over here. Okay, so just focusing on FY27, okay, just the one column, and that's the same summary table that's currently in the report. So uh, Sean could do this, or Sean, you can correct me as I go through it.
Yeah,
But
whatever you
if,
want.
okay,
Kathy, could
so
you have Sean do it because I didn't understand your explanation?
sure. So
Maybe I will
Sean,
understand Sean's.
and is this big enough for everyone to be able to see?
I can make it a little bigger. Okay. If it needs to be a little bigger, let me know. So all the trues are there, so you know that it all balances. That's what those are for. So I'll just start kind of from the beginning. So just a recap. This is broken into sources and uses, right? So the top half of this table are all the sources, the bottom half is all the uses. And this has changed from the initial version that was presented on the second during our second meeting. Kathy described the changes. We put some more money into roads. We removed an IT project. The debt came in better. There was one debt project that was new that got put into the general fund, but it's really an enterprise fund, so that got pulled out. That helped. Um, and then we made the swap on the school projects that were requested from when Shannon came. So it's changed over from when you first saw it, but the mechanics work the same. So this top part we put in here, this is just to let you know what the levy is. And then the first real source of revenue for the capital plan is this cash capital line. So this is basically the taxation from the current year or from the tax levy that will go towards capital. Now, this is based on a prior year levy because we'd like to base it on the last known levy. So it's based on a prior year, but it comes out of the current year levy. So 10.5% is what we're proposing across the board, and you can see what that number looks like over the 5 years. And if at any point what I'm saying is not clear, just yell out. The debt exclusion number is a plug. So whatever we are estimating the debt for the Amethyst Brook Elementary School to be, the debt exclusion revenue number, which is how much additional taxation is raised during that year, will match. So down below in row 28, you'll see we're estimating the debt exclusion payment to be 2.3. So the source or the amount of additional tax revenue we'll raise from the debt exclusion will be the exact same amount. This is still because the building, Amethyst Brook, is still being built and we haven't permanently borrowed for all of the school yet. This number still will change a little bit, but eventually we'll have a set schedule for the entire amount. Right now we have a set schedule for some of it, but not all of it. Community Preservation Act is similar. Community Preservation Act debt is always part of this. It's not something you really evaluate, but it's part of our general fund. So we've always approved it or incorporated it. And essentially, whatever the debt is on Community Preservation Act projects, you'll see it down here in the approved debt, row 23. It's part of that number. And then there will be a source, which is the Community Preservation Act money that will come in to pay that debt. So it's a zero effect on the money that's available for capital, but it does flow into this because CPA debt has to be part of our general fund. It's just a state accounting rule. This Comcast funding, this is the last year of our 10-year agreement with Comcast. We're negotiating a new agreement, so there may possibly be new funding sources available in the future, but we don't know at this point. So this was a set schedule where they give us $75,000 a year, and it's there to offset some of the debt that's in row 23 down below when we did the iNet or the municipal fiber throughout town. It helps pay for some of that debt, not all of it. The other category is the sum of any money that we are proposing to come from the ambulance fund, or there's some money in there from the TNC money, which I mentioned was like the Uber money that we get, which is actually going away. We thought that was going to last longer, but it actually ends. But we have a balance built up over a couple of years there. So it's the ambulance money, it's the Uber money, and then it's also if we close out any old articles. So that's another area that's increased because it includes the closeout of about $275,000 of town articles. We haven't closed out any school articles yet. I'm talking with Shannon. That's something we might do in the fall, and that'll help next year's capital plan. So and there's still some town articles that are pending as well that will help next year's plan. But these are from town, the 275 is from town projects that we felt confident we could close out. And then the last bucket is state aid, and this is just Chapter 90 money. Now, one thing I mentioned to Kathy in the report, and the committee can recommend what they want. I might change it, or I might recommend to Paul that we change it. This is the elevated amount for FY26, but it also relies upon in FY26, the state approved the supplemental appropriation of about $300,000. The ongoing appropriation is closer to 1.1. So I think for transparency and not being overly, optimistic, we should probably drop the future years down to 1.1 and not the 1.4. Now that again will have a zero impact on it because this money is an in and then it's automatically put towards roads. So it will mean, there'll be less money going towards roads from this grant, but it's always going to depend on what the grant is approved at every year. Whatever we get, it goes towards roads. So keep that in mind. Any questions on the sources side before I drop down to the uses? Okay. And I think the part, Bridget, I'm going to pop over to one other tab that I think will explain like the delta between what you're looking at, because you're looking at the sum of the proposed projects and seeing why it doesn't match, and I'll explain why.
Okay, perfect.
So on the uses side, so this approved debt, this includes our CPA debt, the debt that's funded from the Comcast, the 75,000, and then it includes any other general fund projects that were approved with debt in the past that we have payments on. So this is our general fund debt, essentially. The projected debt right now, that's actually where the regional, there's two things that make up that projected debt. It's our estimate for short-term interest. So we budget about $50,000 for short-term interest on bands for things that we may not know exactly what the interest is going to be. So we include a buffer there. And then the rest of it is actually the regional school debt assessment. So I think I mentioned before, I might have said it was in the approved debt row. It's actually in the projected debt row is where we have the regional school debt assessment. And then if you look in the out years where it starts to jump up, that's when you see the DPW debt come in as projected debt. And then some of the other projects, there was some Puffer's Pond projects as well. But the big increase from FY28 to FY29 in projected debt is the estimate of something for the DPW. And then the new projects, so these are the new projects as 4.2. These are the new projects funded with the tax levy. So the difference between this number, the 4.19 here, and the 6 on the other page are the projects for FY27 that are funded with other sources. So for example, in that list, and I'll go to it in a second, there's 1.49 million of state aid. That's Chapter 90 money in that list. And then there's 390 of other. So really, if you add the 4.1 and these two together, let's see if that adds up. I'm clicking the wrong button here. That should get you close to what's on the other page. Let me show you. So the total here is 6,071,000. This is too small. Let me make it a little bigger. The total for FY27 is 6,071,000. That equals the sum of the 4,191,000 for new projects, the 390,000 that's coming from other, and the 1.49, which is the Chapter 90. So that's how you kind of tie those two spreadsheets together. And it's really that some of the projects on the listing, they're not funded with the cash capital, they're funded with either a grant or another funding source.
And then altogether that gets to the 10.5.
It's actually more than 10.5 because
okay.
the grants, for example, like the state aid and those other sources, that's in addition to the 10.5.
So that's, Bridget, if you look up on his sources, the total is 11.8, but it has all those pieces.
I saw that one too.
So it's got all those
trying
pieces.
to get that 10.5 aligned with what we were spending here. But I think as he goes through it, I understand. Let's see if other people get it too.
Yeah, the 10.5 helps pay for the new projects and pay for our debt, essentially. But not all of it. Yeah, Deb?
You lost me on the 4.191 plus the 1.490.
It's the sum of the new projects.
Yeah.
Plus the sum of the other, which is the additional money we put into roads and some of the ambulance capital that's funded from the ambulance fund. Yeah. And it's the TNC money for Uber. Yeah. And then the state aid. So if you add the other, the state aid, and the new projects together, you get the total from our from the line item capital budget.
So another way to think about it is the amount of money we have to spend in 27 that is not allocated to something else already is 4.2 million plus part of the 390 or a large part of the 390 because roads is So on the Excel spreadsheet, there's 1.49, but that's chapter 90. It can only go to roads.
Right.
And then there's a little bit of the other. There's a tiny amount, 15,000 is financed by the ambulance fund. So it's
Yeah.
not coming out of the 4.1.
Yeah.
And then Sean found this other by closing out.
Yeah.
So he's got next to an increase in roads, he's got the source being other.
And this is where, if you look at this sheet and what you have,
I got it.
I may not have explained this column
No.
very clearly when we first reviewed it, but this shows what source the project is coming
Yep.
from. And
Gotcha.
this is what totals to the other page. And my check, I have all those true and falses.
Right.
It's down below. It just totals this and says how
Yep.
much is from cash, how much is state
Yep.
aid, how much is other, how much is borrowing, to
Got
make
it.
sure that it comes across correctly.
Okay, I understand. I didn't need to, but I do now.
Okay. And then everything else
Now-
in here, the debt exclusion, the projected debt, and the approved debt, it's not on that list because it's debt. It's from projects that have been approved already or maybe approved in the future, but they're not, it's not a current year project.
Okay, thank you.
And so one of the things that happened when he closed out and then corrected one other piece in terms of how much debt we were actually financing is it freed up enough money that the Crocker Farm playground could be cash. It used to not show up at all as cash because we weren't going to start paying for it till FY27. So now so the change there is not more money, but not debt finance. So it's a cash finance on it. And he changed, so the new Excel spreadsheet has that in red, not because 175 changed, but it's not debt anymore, it's cash.
I understand. Thank you.
All right, Kathy, do you want me to pull up the report?
Yeah, and I guess if we start in, we can go any way you want. Line item edits, if there's just minor like wording and stuff, we can do at the very end, or people can send them to me. But anything substantive, so that there is, we had a bunch of projects proposed to us, and we're basically, the way this is drafted, we're accepting them with a few changes. So Shannon came in and swapped out what she had originally asked for, and the report says we're accepting that. And Jeff Bagg said he wanted to combine two small projects into one. So we didn't make any cuts in the proposed projects that were proposed because we're able to balance the budget. We didn't have to cut anything to get to a balanced budget. And because of Sean, found an additional amount of money to put on the roads line.
And keep in mind, Kathy, I pre-cut some of them. You have that list that shows what the department had originally requested and what made into the capital plan. So they may feel even the amount that's in there was a cut. Just want to clarify that was the case.
So at this particular draft that you have in front of you, used what was proposed to us where Sean had already reduced it. And the question is, are people comfortable with that? And I just know because of emails I had that there are people that they're wanting to call in questions, because right now we are accepting what was in this version of the draft. I didn't hear anyone last week say they wanted to make a change, but that doesn't mean you had to say it last week. So now is the time to make any changes. And Sean, maybe pull up, I don't know what's easiest for people, to look at the FY27 Expel line or to look at the words that go with each project. Any way you want to look at what is the project list we're looking at. Bridget.
Jill and I made a proposal. Could I share my screen and show that to y'all?
Yeah, Sean is the host.
Yeah, let me make sure you have. I'll make you a co-host, and that way you can do that.
And Bridget, what I just want to say on the proposal, you don't have to set a whole policy. You can go after a particular line and explain what you want to do with it.
I understand, but I feel very strongly because I was watching JCPC a couple of years before I came on, and I feel like if we had a policy, then the departments could plan, people could plan around it, but also, in watching things happen before and
Sure.
after, I would love to see. Okay, let me see if I've got it. Okay, you're seeing all my desktop. Let me open up. There we go. And let me move you all down to the corner. Maybe I can even make you smaller. All right, so Jill, do you want to talk about the policy overall and then, or would you like me to?
I mean, yeah, and I think what we have here is pretty straightforward. And I'll just say I agree with it being then on the other side of this new to JCPC. I think it would have been helpful to have this at the outset. And I think it makes sense to do this before we just do another year of saying, okay, we'll say yes to all this and then we'll make a policy, which, as we know, can lead to things just falling through the cracks. So what we have here just says, I don't know if it's helpful to read it, but that the town of Amherst maintains a safe, reliable, and fiscally responsible fleet that supports essential public services while minimizing unexpected failures, repair costs, and operational disruptions while being fair and consistent across departments. And then it has a couple of criteria here and then also includes an important exception that can be made in the case of major mechanical failure or structural damage that makes a necessary vehicle inoperable. So not at all saying that if a vehicle doesn't meet this criteria but is not usable, that means it can't be replaced. So I think that was an important distinction to add. Um, Bridget.
So,
And I
so
just
it
wanted
just,
to talk a little bit about the reasoning. I think I feel like we need a clear, consistent standard. And I don't think the 12 years or 175,000 miles is burnt in stone. I ran the numbers and got a rough average. And I saw that on the vehicles that we were replacing earlier, for example, in some of the feedback from departments, they were having no repair records at 10 years and 133,000 miles or 120,000 miles. So I thought, okay, there's room to go here. So I have some flexibility there, but our job right on JCPC by the standards that Kathy gave are to replace things that are urgent and essential. And without a clear policy, we end up debating urgency between departments every single year, and we have a lot of inconsistency. Everyone probably here knows the story of when my son's school bus was coming down from Berkshire East with ski team, and the wheel and axle fell off the vehicle, and it was declared unsafe by the state police who were on the scene. And that vehicle was 20 years old and over 200,000 miles. And then I watched these very meetings replace other vehicles that were like 3 or 4 years old with like just under 100,000 miles. And then over the summer, I know that I was talking to some people who work for the town, and we're like, there's just this wide variation, and it leads to sort of bad feelings between departments. Like some departments are more spoiled than others. I think 12 years or 170,000 miles is a reasonable threshold for our budget realities, and it extracts the full value of a vehicle without pushing it into the stage where we're getting a lot of costly repairs and failures. And before that, it feels hard to escalate, but like I said, I could compromise on the amount. Also, if we direct more from this, our proposal actually is to move the money from the vehicles that fall outside of this into road paving, then all of our vehicles will last longer. So that's one of the things. I don't think we can wait 2 more years for town council to make a policy. We're the committee who decides on vehicle replacement. And so I think it's within our purview and it makes sense. And this way, their departments can plan ahead. There's no misunderstandings. Everyone's treated the same. No department is advantaged or disadvantaged. All of our emergency vehicles idle. Most of them run 24/7. There's a short break in DPW shifts, but they still run most of the day. And so I just trying to balance that fiscal responsibility and operational reliability. I wanted to talk for a minute about what vehicles it impacts. So we would still keep the fire prevention, the school maintenance vehicle, the special ed van, the DPW loader, and the DPW roadside mower. these vehicles don't meet our standards, which are 3 DPW vehicles, 1 pickup truck, and 2 mid-sized dump trucks. One is at highway and the other at tree and grounds, and 3 PD vehicles. The oldest PD vehicle was 2016 with 133 miles, and per Chief Tank's information, there've been no repair history. And they can, if they plan ahead, they can get an extended warranty for only $3,000. The documents he provided showing on a $90,000 vehicle. That sounds like a great deal. So that's where I'll stop for now. I'll go back up to the motion in case there's any changes or comments, etc.
So let me just make a statement first and then take people's reactions to this. JCPC is an advisory committee to the town manager. And so it actually doesn't make these kinds of policies. It has never. We can propose a policy, and he would typically take it to someplace in the council. So this is not out of line in trying to think of a policy, but for us to come up with a policy and make it the policy is probably stretches the limit of what we are. So if one possibility would be in this report to say, here is a possible policy that we're proposing. And to the extent it applies to proposed purchases this year, we could decide we want to apply it and explain why. So I'm not saying that's out of the range of us saying these 3 vehicles. And Sean, I double checked on which vehicles the police were actually reposed. I was never sure which lines. A few of them are listed as very poor condition, Bridget. 2 of them are. 1 is not. And Sean can put that up, but just on, how bad a shape are some of them. And a couple of them were high mileage. So I wasn't sure which ones they were replacing. But so with that said, I'd love to hear people's reaction to this idea of a policy. And last year, JCPC left off with one person who's no longer a counselor. Bob Hegner said over the summer he was going to try to work with people to come up with one. And when he went off the council, he said, "Oh, forgot to do it." So Bridget, you're absolutely right. It didn't happen. So just any thoughts on this idea of a proposed policy? And then I'd like to get at which vehicles are actually on the list for this year, because I think DPW is down to 2 rather than 3. So just in terms of going back on the vehicle list. So Jean, and so I want to first just deal on the concept of the policy as it is being proposed. Jean.
I think this is a good idea, again, into the context of what you were talking about, Kathy, whether or not it's within our scope. I just wanted to ask a question. Probably maybe Sean would know, when we talk about a police cruiser, it probably spends as much time idling as it does driving. So is miles a good measurement for a police cruiser? And I'm assuming the police cruisers don't, for instance, have an hour meter like a generator has on it, because that would be probably helpful because that would enable us to quantify it.
It's a good question. I also like the idea of a policy. I think we would definitely want feedback from department heads on the policy. Like, I don't know, for example, that this policy reflects the electric vehicles that we have or the hybrid vehicles that we have, where, when a battery comes up for replacement, that might be the time to consider, especially school buses, that might be the time to consider replacement. So I like the idea of a policy. And I think you're right. I think different departments will have feedback on how their vehicles are used. And I don't know if one threshold for all vehicles is or they may have feedback that it's a little bit different, because the police, they're in those vehicles most of the hours of the day and they're running for long hours, versus a vehicle that's used, a little bit, a vehicle might be fine after 15 years if it only has 20,000 miles. So I think that would be my recommendation, but you're right, Eugene. I think some vehicles might have different metrics that you'd want to consider.
And could you scroll back up to the policy, Bridget? Just you've got it on your screen. And I just want because we can certainly write this into the report as a recommendation. So I'm not saying this is an out of scope thought of proposing a policy. I just want to so Jean brought up idling. Deb.
So I understand that, there's a process and there's been a process.
What, you muted yourself? Oops.
And I'm new to JCPC, but perhaps this could be something that we use to make some decisions on today, and then going forth, suggest that the town come up with a formal policy.
Yeah, that's what so if there were specific, going to a project list, if we want to say this one on some level doesn't meet this, we can then recommend a cut, and then we can say where we want that money to go. We can definitely do that. So I'm not saying we can't. So I have a quick reaction. There are some vehicles we have that are older than 12 years that are not listed as being fair or poor condition, and I wouldn't want to replace them. So I think in terms of a policy, I want it to work. There might be some vehicles that before 170, so consider, these are things to consider as you go on. Last time we talked this through, and we had wording such as at the point the repairs of the vehicle get to be so consequential that buying a new one, so whether it's 12-year-olds or 175, if it's falling apart all the time, we got a lemon, so you've got total mechanical failure. But we had Sarah was actually talking about, that we are spending $3,000 every year because this is failing, then this is failing. So trying to think of a policy that really works, I think, is what you're aiming for, Bridget, as a screener, so that people aren't proposing a replacement just because the thing is a bit on the old side. You'd like it to be in the shop a fair amount or, rusting out, something about the vehicle is starting to fail. So I don't think we need to solve this right now. And if people are more or less comfortable with the concept, we can figure out there's a place in the report saying we need a policy, and this is an idea we've come up with, and we are proposing that further work be done on it. And then I don't know enough about each of those vehicles. So we have a vehicle list with the listing is fair, poor, fair, good, excellent. And we have a bunch of them that are in not great shape that no one proposed to replace this year. It's the flip side. Sean is held down the last several years. We haven't been doing very much buying. So I don't want to start buying more vehicles than we need either. I want to keep the number as low as possible. So I see Andy's hand is up, Sean's hand is up, and Bridget. I'm just going to do in that order, Bridget. So Andy first.
Bridget, can you scroll down so we can see what the impact would be of this on the various? So basically, this is saying that DPW and the police would take would take the hit this year based on these standards. And then scrolling back up again, I guess I like the idea of having a standard, but I'm sort of concerned about just implementing what to me seems like a sincere, first step, but it doesn't seem to take into account the different uses of the vehicles and, idling versus running. And I'm concerned about having, a policy that's not, run through the various processes that would make sure that it's considering the various, differences, or having the right metric for considering the condition of the vehicle. And then having that and then saying, okay, based on this, we're cutting all 3 police cruisers and a couple of heavy trucks that DPW says they need. So, if we were still trying to cut the budget, I'd be like, great. Otherwise, we have a balanced budget now that's already been pretty much trimmed before it even came to us, and I just think it's going to be a problem. I think it's problematic not to have a tighter definition and then say, sorry, no police cars this year, and no dump truck for tree and ground. So I don't know. I think I think it needs more thought.
Can I just ask a point of clarification? Because I was under the impression that the DPW vehicles were already moved into next year. So I just wanted to
That's correct.
maybe
Yeah, that's what I
I
was
don't
going
want
to
to
say. You've
detract
got,
Andy from your point, but I just wanted to side clarify that quickly.
there are a few that are on this list that aren't up for FY27.
Okay.
So
Well,
I
that's
think it would be good to focus on FY27. So Bridget, go ahead. And then Sean, because he has some information to bring to us too. Bridget, you're muted.
Sorry. Yeah, no, I was bouncing all over. I was trying to go back to that other sheet, but realized I shouldn't do it while y'all are sharing my screen. Um, so first thing, I thought a lot about this question of idling, and I must have thought about it too much since the PD presentation and the other one, because there's a school bus that sits on my block for like a half an hour every morning idling, and then goes stop, go, stop, go. And then you see them again waiting between the next shift, just sitting there idling. And that's like a small example, but everybody else who does patrols, DPW does extensive patrols. They drive the whole town over and over again looking for projects and everything. And then anytime the vehicles for fire or DPW have their lights on, they're also idling. So I think that it's important to think that a lot of these vehicles are getting pretty intense and similar use. The other thing is, and I think the fair, good, excellent is another good thing, maybe to even add into our standard. But the mileage and it says it doesn't say, well, let me go up and see. When they meet, it says when they meet either, right? It doesn't say both, but I think those are the criteria that are objective. All the other ones are sort of, I would love to know what makes like the fair, good, excellent objective or subjective as a measure, I guess. So the reason I chose those is because that's what's available to us as a committee on a regular basis, and that's always been what's been provided across the time. So and the last thing I wanted to say is it says major mechanical, and so I think that's like your axles, all the things in New England that go down that are famous, like those types of things. So I think it's got a lot of wiggle room in it. I went back and forth between 10 years and 150,000 miles. So I didn't know how everyone felt about that. But I really feel like if we operate with some sort of standard, a lot of the subjectivity that has existed in the past in the process could be handled. And that's all I have to say.
So let me get to Sean. So what I'd like to do, since we have to focus on a report that we're writing, is I will propose that I take this, I draft it into a separate memo that says, here's a proposed vehicle policy. We can make an appendix to the report any way that flags it. So Paul sees it, council sees it, and we don't spend a huge amount of time trying to get to a final policy here, but we say, here's a beginning step at a policy. And so I noticed fair, poor, we could define those, right, Bridget? We could say, you can only list it as a fair in the following way. So we could, what Sean said, so let's move to the vehicles we have this year that we want to question whether we should be buying them or not. And have this, I'm not saying we wouldn't write this up, but we could expand. I can drop it into, there's a section in the report that says we need a vehicle policy, and I can say, here's a proposed vehicle policy, and just take this text and plop it in with some comments we've made on it, but trying to not wordsmith the policy till we think this is the perfect policy, but we can say, here's a proposed beginning one. Would that work in terms of not spending, it's 5:40 and I'm going to try to end the meeting, the 2-hour meeting, because there is the rest of the report as well. So, so I think it's the 3 police cars that we're questioning because
These 3 were already taken out and moved to next year.
There's
Is that right?
DPW has the one. I just looked at the list. Sean can let Sean come in, but DPW has one large, the highway loader is the one that's on it. And otherwise, it doesn't have anything other than that is the roadside mower. Those are the 2 DPW roadside mower.
So the 3 DPWs, the 1 pickup truck and the mid-sized truck that wouldn't meet our standard have already been moved to next year.
They're
Or
not
to
on the
another
list.
time
They're not on the
anymore.
list.
They
They're
were
not.
on
No,
it, for sure.
they're not on the list for FY27. They've never been on the list.
No, Kathy,
They
they
were
were
there.
never on our list. Where they were is when
Guilford's list.
Guilford submitted them and we made him prioritize, and so they got pushed into an out year.
So that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Sean has already moved them off because he said which is in the worst shape, which is the top
Oh, okay.
priorities. So in terms of our $6 million that we're spending, or the 4 million, they're not on the list. So we won't save any money if we delete them because they're not on the list. That's just, I just want to make that distinction
Mhm.
because a lot of vehicles have been pushed off over time. But the
So
police,
someone decided already those ones weren't up to the standard of replacing yet.
and the head of the department decided that they were lesser, made an urgency. One is falling apart versus others. So there has been some rational thinking. So that also speaks to the need for a policy. But Sean, you can jump in because that's the one the police are on for 270 for 3 vehicles. That is,
Yeah.
So
I think we looked at it, Kathy. There's the 2 vehicles that are in poor condition. I would still recommend that those be considered for replacement. I think going down 1 could be justified. I think the other thing the policy. So another suggestion is maybe we schedule a date in July for this group to come back together and we could review. I could have work done and get feedback from department heads, and we could come back together and have this policy um, re-reviewed before next year's JCPC cycle. But the things that I don't think it considers is having a replacement schedule for vehicles. So every department has a fleet, and I worry the way in its current form, it might be 1 year you have a whole bunch of vehicles that come up. Are we going to replace them all? And then years there's none. And right now we try to do it on a schedule where it's sort of spread out over 5, 10 years. Like the fire department, for example, they come every other year for an ambulance. They may not exactly hit those numbers that are in the policy, but it allows that to be predictable and smoothed out. You don't always want to wait necessarily, and we try not to wait for something to break before we replace it, because then we get calls like, why are we waiting for things to break before we replace them? We should stay ahead of the maintenance on these things. We hear that a lot with our buildings, for example. So I think that's just another thing we would want to keep in mind when we draft this policy is replacement schedule, smoothing out the cost, considering the factors in terms of the thresholds for when it comes up, but how do we also budget for that over a 5-year, 10-year plan? Because then we're trying to make guesses on when things will hit those thresholds.
And it might be helpful that Sean went back today to say exactly which vehicles you're talking about, the police, and they flagged 2 that are older with higher mileage that are rated as in not great shape. And then the third, Bridget, I think all of us would question, why is that even on the list? So maybe you can put the vehicle, they name which 3 are you trying to replace? And I was surprised by the answer. So there's a vehicle list and they gave us N, P, and J as the vehicles. So I don't know whether you want Sean to save the list, but 2 of them were older and in not great shape. And one is one of the newer hybrids. And
I stopped sharing, right? Do you want to share, Sean?
Yeah, Kathy, I don't know if I have it in a way that's helpful. I think I sent that little snippet to them and they responded with their vehicles.
Well, they did. If you bring up the vehicle list, they gave us the they gave us the vehicle name. So there was vehicle number N, vehicle number P, and vehicle number J. And on your vehicle list, those numbers showed up. So that's what
Yeah.
I went back and looked at.
Give me
So N,
one
N and
second.
P, I'll just read it up. N and P are in fair position.
Kathy, share your screen so
Share my screen if I can find it. Wouldn't that be nice?
Hold on, Kathy.
I,
I can get it. I can get it in a second here.
I'm looking on my iPad, Bridget, because I don't keep the vehicle list. As you might not have noticed, but in my draft report, the vehicle list was not in it. It's an enormous list.
So
Okay,
this is
yeah.
these are the vehicles.
Okay, so the police, when we asked exactly which things, N and P, so it's row 36 and row 37, that are used daily, that have over 100,000 miles, they're gas, and they're in fair condition. Nothing seems to be, so they're not proposing to replace one that's actually listed in poor position. And then the other one was J.
But just to clarify, Kathy, the poor one, that's a vehicle they use very infrequently,
that they
and
don't use. Yeah.
and it was donated to them, and they probably won't replace it necessarily when a lot of departments have vehicles that were either gifted or donated to them. Like the Harleys, like they won't replace these Harleys, for example, when they're no longer usable. These were things that are sort of a legacy.
So, and the intention
yeah.
on N and P is also to get off of gasoline and go to hybrid. So that's why the price tag is high for those. So N and P are two of them, and then the other one is J. And J is row number 56.
Yeah, and I would want to follow. I think they might have that wrong. I mean,
They might have just given us the wrong number
yeah, I
because
don't know if the letter got, because that doesn't, yeah, I agree with you. Like
it
that
just
seems
J
odd
doesn't make any
unless
sense. It's
there was an
listed.
accident or something that happened to it and it changed the condition. But um, the miles are relatively low and the years, only 3 years old. So I wonder if they made a mistake.
Yeah, so that was a surprise to me because I thought they were going to pick the three that were high mileage and gas. So those first three, NP and T, but that's not what and one is an administrative SUV, not a patrol car. So they're picking them also based on whether it's out every day and they're racing to go to an ambulance run and get there as part of the group. So I think the question is 270, I'm certainly not prepared to say all three don't meet a criteria that we don't even know what the condition is. Do we want to say one less? And when we ask, could you live with one less? The answer seemed to be yes. That was a Q&A, seemed to be yes. Jill.
Yeah, I just want to remember the fact that we're talking about urgent needs this year, especially in a tough budget year, as we had difficult conversations about putting money to the roads or the auditorium roof or these other urgent needs. I know that this isn't a dollar amount that is on that level, but I think we need to show that we're doing what we should be doing in terms of really focusing on urgent needs, and two vehicles that might be, you know, might need repair at some point in the near future, just that doesn't meet my own personal criteria for the word urgent. And I think that that's our charge. And I think that that's just something I want to remember as we have this conversation. And also the fact that we were going to go forward with this without really discussing this detail just emphasizes that I appreciate Bridget raising this up, because it's easy to just say, sounds good, sounds good, sounds good. And I think we don't even really know what this third vehicle is.
So I'll hear Bridget speaking, but I just want to make the point that the list that was brought to us by Sean already cut off most of the vehicles, which is why we didn't have to make the harder decisions, Jill. They were already cut way back. And the year before, the same thing happened. So vehicles, I'm not arguing for these three vehicles. I'm just saying that it helps a committee that has never looked at a vehicle before, that the list has already been pared way down before it gets to us. The first year I watched JCPC, it was 5 million over budget for the first year. And everyone said, what do we do with that? And the town manager came back and said, no vehicles this year. and made life easy, because all the vehicles, that was the first 2018. Sean, do you remember that? I mean, it was like an impossible task, and everyone said, well, problem solved. So the town has been working hard to get the list down. So you shouldn't feel you're not living
No,
up to expectation. So I guess the question is, and Bridget has her hand up. The question is, do we have enough information to make a suggestion? And again, it's a recommendation that we reduce the number of vehicles and with a focus on the police. So that's Bridget, and you're up. So I think that's what we're down to into the 27 year, in addition to we need a vehicle policy.
I was thinking of the standard without looking at who it hit and just trying to think what's reasonable, and I mean, many vehicles last much longer than this. They say the average new car can go 200,000. And, my parents have a Prius that's at 300,000. So I don't think the hybrid is necessarily the thing. But in our town, we have to be like responsible stewards for very limited resources. These particular vehicles don't even come close to the lowest standard that I considered. They're certainly not urgent. And everybody that I talk to in town, and maybe because I'm on school committee, but they say roads and schools, schools and roads. We don't want this pitting of one against the other. That they really want both. And then we have a situation here where we could put more money to roads. Are we going to do it or not?
So Leah's next, and then I think what's being proposed is you're just I'm calling on you, Lee, next. But I think what's being proposed is, do we want to consider recommending not do the police, not do the 270? Lee.
I'm not sure where I am in this, but I hear you and I hear Bridget, and it sounds as though like over time or prior to this, the lack of a policy encouraged the town, encouraged people to come in with a wish list.
That's correct.
Yeah. And so everybody's trying to figure out how to make it so it's more reasonable. So it's what you really need, because it's a real world, and how these different entities interact. And so I'm not sure, what's best to do at this moment, but I agree that something needs to be done to get the people coming in to understand that there's a budget and there's a town increase every year, and our proposals need to come in within those parameters. So that's all I have to say.
Sean, and then Andy.
Yeah, again, I don't think they come in with a wish list. I think they're looking at their whole fleet of vehicles and thinking about how do they manage this fleet and keep their fleet up and running over, 10 to 12 years. I know the fire department does that. I know the police department does that. And I think the other thing I would just keep in mind, and the committee's recommendation, not trying to sway it in any way, but from the time a vehicle is purchased, it could be 6 to 12 months before that vehicle is received. So if this was approved, for example, it's possible that these cruisers aren't received until July, the spring of 2027. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at the mileage and the condition and all that. So if let's say they get pushed off a year, then we're talking, June, spring of 2028. So that's especially when we're looking at like fire trucks and ambulances. Those can take, north of 18 months to 2 years. You may not want to wait till they get to these thresholds to approve those, because then by the time you actually replace them, they're going to be well over the thresholds that have been set. So especially now with the way vehicles are, there's a long lead time to get them replaced.
Andy.
I'm curious about this point about keeping the fleet from, trying to make sure that you can turn over the fleet and maintain a fleet over time. So I think that's an issue that this doesn't, or at least the criteria that we have right now don't take that into account. And I do feel like there are some departments that use their shifts more, their vehicles more intensively, 3 shifts rather than 1 or 2. And I'm concerned that, that we establish the idea of a policy without really consulting the departments on it, and then say the result of that policy is that the police are the one department that doesn't get any vehicles, or that gets cut. So we just got a letter from the police on a different topic, but talking about morale problems, and I would feel concerned about singling out a particular department without having a really good reason for doing it. So.
Lee.
I agree with Andy. This is for Sean, right? And maybe Kathy. Do you think it's possible to design a policy that would take in these nuances, and that, not all vehicle usages are the same, and or do you think it's better to just keep ad hocing it department by department?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be challenging. I don't think it's not going to be as cut and dry as what was proposed. Which again, in some ways, I really like that because it makes my job really easy when vehicles get submitted by departments. I can say, didn't hit this threshold, you can't submit it. So, trust me, I would love a policy like that if I thought that as written would completely work for all departments. But I think it's going to leave some room for flexibility is I think how we would have to do it. It's going to have to leave room for flexibility and considering replacement schedules. I think the other department we would want to hear from is sustainability, because I think the other thing that's not factored in is if we're going to run all these vehicles to 175,000 miles, especially gasoline ones, would we want to replace them sooner, I guess, especially the gasoline vehicles, than letting them run for that much longer. I don't, we do have a replacement, a sustainability policy on vehicles and how, when they get replaced, what we can do with the old vehicles. So I think we'd want their input as well on whatever is proposed. But I think we can factor that in, but I would need help from department heads thinking about how we do that.
Deb.
So the data nerd in me would love to take a look at which vehicles have been replaced historically and what conditions criteria they met, the mileage, the state, the department, and just to see if there's any patterns that emerge from that before, if you're talking about long-term policy, before making those kinds of decisions. I think that would inform, and then you can create a rubric and then see how it applies to the other vehicles that were denied in those cycles. So I think there's a place for doing it systematically. I also think that a system is better than no system. So I mean, the conversation was, should we deny things based on something that hasn't been studied? And then the flip side is, should we approve things based on no criteria besides the fact that there has been a process before this list came before us, which again, I'm new on JCPC, but it seemed like the fact that the budget was balanced before it came forward makes me wonder exactly what my role is, since it is just a recommending body.
So just last year, and they didn't do enough on it probably when we had them here. The police made a case that a couple of their vehicles, when racing to an emergency, had failed, and they can't afford to have that happen, in terms of the condition of them. We didn't press them hard enough. I totally agree on the 3 they want to replace. Like how? So I think we're in a situation right now, and I'm just going to ask whether we can put it to a vote. It looks like we have 3 vehicles that are in question. Do we want, right now the report is silent on cutting a project in FY27. It calls for a vehicle policy and said, we've asked for this before and we don't have one. And we can write that much stronger. And what Sean said, convene a group in the summer to come up with one, get department heads engaged in this. And Lee's concern is have a policy that people can live with, but has some nuances in it. It's going to be different if it's an ambulance or the only one of the things Guilford had this year, the only vehicle that can do certain things for road work and the other one's in the shop, and it's breaking down for whatever reasons. And Bridget, you've cited a bunch of vehicles that have lasted a long time. A neighbor of ours hit one of the town's top potholes, smashed a radiator, and bought a new car. So we also have where
That happened
we
to
have
me
some
last
unusual
year,
wear
but
and
my car
we
had
have some
some mud.
unusual wear and tear on a vehicle. But what I'd like to know is, and I want to put it to vote. It's basically 3 cars and we can right now. The report version is silent on the 3. It calls for a vehicle policy. We could say instead of 3, 2, reduce it by 1 and have the police decide which one. Or the other piece is don't fund any of the 3 because we don't have enough information. And again, this is all a recommendation from us. The town manager doesn't have to do this. Then the flip side of that is what do we do with that money? And when you're saying roads are a high priority, we are funding everything the school asked for. So I just want to make that clear. The elementary school got their full request. And so the place to put that money would be roads. And so we could say we're going to increase the money on roads. So that would be say, if we're going to do anything, I think the recommendation should then put it into roads. And Bridget, originally over the weekend, you said put more into the playground, but Shannon had said 175 will do exactly what she wants for that. That was her estimate. And then the big playground doing a brand new accessible is on the list for next year, not for this year. So she didn't
Yeah,
ask for
that's
more
how
money.
we moved to roads. Yeah.
Yeah.
We heard like we got your.
So I'd like to actually put it to a vote if people are willing to. And the question is, do we remain silent, which it does now? And so it accepts that Excel sheet with 3 vehicles at 270. Do we go to a smaller number, which could be 2, which saves 90,000, 3, 2 vehicles only, 1 vehicle only, or all 270? So it's a range of 90,000 to 270 off of that one line that would go to roads. Andy.
I'd like to hear from Sean about what his take is on, the impact of cutting from 3 to 2 or 3 to none.
I think 3 to 2 they can manage. I think we did ask them that question. I agree with you, Kathy. The sense was that 1 would be manageable, but they also were reduced last year. Am I right, Kathy, in terms of their requests, is what I understand. I think going from 3 to none, it's just, they're gonna have to make do. I'm sure they won't be happy with it, and I'm sure they'll have concerns over the condition of some of those vehicles. Having them for at least the next 2 years. But again, as Kathy mentioned, ultimately it'll be the town manager that will make that decision in consultation with the police chief and what he feels comfortable proposing.
So I will say, and I will put it to vote, I'm not comfortable with doing 3. I could consider 1, saying recommend 2 rather than 3. And when I'm looking at the high mileage and they don't get a new one for another year and they're running gasoline and it's already listed in fair condition. Granted, we don't know what fair means, but it means it's not good. There was a choice on that. I would not be comfortable in going to 0. So that's my opinion, but I'm willing to, and people can tell me how to put it to a vote, whether it's leave it the same would be the first vote, cut by 1, cut by more than 1. Eugene, and I won't call for a vote until I hear from everybody. Yeah.
I mean, it's almost like there's 3 votes. I would agree. I wouldn't be comfortable going down to 0. And they've already kind of, police have already kind of said that they'd be willing to lose 1. And while we were discussing this, of course, I started Googling and, municipal vehicle retention policies. There's a really good one from Milton, for instance, and it's quite a bit more complex because it does bring up what is that vehicle for? You replace a vehicle that's used in emergency situations like an ambulance or a cop car, probably a bit quicker than you would something that's not quite as critical. I definitely would vote. I would agree with you, Kathy. I would vote to trim 1 off because it does seem 3, especially considering the state of our roads. I'm on Middle Street, which is there's some very interesting sections to that. I would let's get a parameter for like what are our voting options, 0, 1, 2, or 3. I don't think, so how do we do that
Well,
here? Yeah.
so Bridget, you can suggest. I mean, the first would be
Yeah,
is don't
I think,
state. Yeah,
sorry, Kathy.
go on.
I just thought, well, we made the motion, we brought it forward, so I haven't got a second on it, but we start with our motion. If it doesn't pass, we move down to 2, we move to 1, and then if at the end, we vote to give all of it. So we just move through the process.
Okay.
So your motion
From-
is to eliminate all 3.
The motion we had was to follow the
Okay,
the
I will
proposed
put, I will
vehicle
put,
standard
I
and do
will,
all 3.
I'll put reduce to 3 as the first vote, and I will take a roll call vote. I'll go round. Eugene,
This is to reduce to 0 to take
Yep.
all 3 away. So
Yep.
no, I would say no.
Bridget,
Yes.
Deb,
I'm going to abstain. I'm sorry.
that's okay. Andy,
No.
Lee,
No.
Jill,
Yes.
and Kathy is a no. Okay. So do I flip to cut by just
So-
1, or do you want me to go up the ladder?
The next
I'm
one
willing
is
to-
for 180, right? Like, so cut 2 and then that puts
Okay,
180
so
towards roads.
I'll put the vote, cut 2, but leave 1. So the vote is, do we reduce from 3 to 1? And a yes would be yes, cut 2, and a no would be no, don't cut 2. Eugene,
I'm going to say no.
Bridget,
Yes.
Deb,
Yes.
Andy,
No.
Lee,
No.
Jill,
Yes.
and Kathy is a no. So let me just, can someone help me count? So Jill, Deb, and Bridget were yeses. Is that correct?
Yeah.
The
And then
motion
number 4.
fails.
What?
The motion
And then-
fails.
Okay. So I just wanted to make sure I'm counting right. Okay. Cut 1 vehicle. Eugene,
Yes.
Bridget,
Yes.
Deb,
Yes.
Andy,
Yes.
Jill,
Yes.
Lee,
Yes.
and Kathy is a yes. It's unanimous. Isn't that nice? Well, it is. I mean, it is on some level nice. When we voted for the Fort Rivers School, the final vote was unanimous, but we took 4 votes to get there. The school. Deb,
So what is the criterion? So what the 2 that passed, assuming we use some sort of age condition,
yep. And we
What is the
did
cri-
ask.
what
I'll
is
say the
crit-
2 criteria. We asked the police in an earlier in Shongut, could they live with 2 rather than 3? And they said yes, they could make do. And they've named 2 of them that are in worse shape, and they're listed as fair right now
Yeah,
on
but-
their list.
what are their ages in miles?
Do you want me to read it, Kath? You got it.
2017 and 2016, and they have 133,000 and 120,000 mile in that neighborhood. And they would be a year older when they would have them. And they're gasoline, so they're proposing to go from gas to hybrid on those 2.
And the one that didn't pass?
Well,
Assuming-
Sean thinks they gave us the wrong one because when they quickly responded to us when a J, because it's unlikely that they meant a fairly new hybrid with low miles. It's
Okay.
unlikely, unless there's something about that one. So we aren't going to tell them which one, but we're going to tell them they only get 2.
Well, that's not fair because they can replace the easier one and then game the system for next year, right?
No,
Yeah, Deb, we would do the two older ones.
Okay.
we're not,
Again, unless there's something about that hybrid where,
All right.
as Kathy mentioned, it's a lemon, it would be the two older ones that would get replaced. Our goal is to, make our fleet more sustainable, and that would be two more off the list of gasoline.
Okay.
remember there's a procurement process and it goes through one of the people in this room. That's right. Called Sean. It's not just, okay. So we've gotten to the point on the report, it's 6:11, that we add a recommendation that we reduce the police from 3 to 2, which is a savings of 90,000. And is everyone comfortable with saying and redirect that to roads? Yes, I don't see anyone saying no. So Sean can bring up the Excel spreadsheet if he wants to. And it will be the way the report is written is we're going to shade anything in red that was affected by decisions we made during it so that the town manager can follow it or anyone who's reading it. So if we go through the decisions we've made, and so that is changing to minus, okay, he's going to do it right in real time here. And then, so that changes to red, and then roads goes up by 90, wherever roads is.
Deb, do you want me to share the resident capital feedback at this point or no?
Yeah, and so then the other one, so road goes up by another 90.
I didn't get the question,
Oh,
Sean.
sorry, I said I meant Kathy. Remember,
Gee.
so
And red shade that one, Sean, too.
so one of the follow-ups from last time was to look into those resident capital requests that were submitted, and one of them was for soundproofing at the North Amherst Library. I did talk to Paul, and Paul said he would be supportive of a recommendation from this committee to add funding for that. We got a quote of between $6,000 or $7,000. I think the resident capital requester was for 10, so somewhere between those two would be the right amount. And if this committee wanted to recommend that, I would suggest adding it to Jeremiah's request, because he would be the one that would lead the purchase of that and get that installed at the North Amherst Library.
And just so people know, the last version we saw, or the one we're working with right now, had 9,000 and some odd dollars in change. That if we spent it, we balanced it out. So it almost exactly matches the soundproofingness. So it would be moving that 9 down to 0 and moving it up into the Jeremiah facility line. And our wording would make it clear that number assumes that that's going to happen, and we'd have a resident proposal that we said yes to. So it's a question of, did the committee want to do that? Because that 9 could also be put to roads. It's 9,000. The budget had a minor surplus in it. Deb.
I would support the moving it to roads.
Andy.
I don't think it would make any difference on the condition of the roads, and I think it would make a difference on the usability of that room. I know a number of us have been in that room a number of times, and it's very echoey, and just putting down some, non-slippable wall-to-wall carpeting or something might make a huge difference and make it more useful for community events.
Deb's hand is up. I'd take any comments on this. This is, whether we're recommending, and on some level, Jeremiah's got $750,000, so he could potentially do this out of that budget. Dev.
Was there some discussion about whether or not the people who installed the designers were responsible for making that more user friendly?
Yeah, so we've reached out to Kuhn Riddle for help. They're giving us information, but they would never buy it would never be on them to buy the materials needed to make it soundproof. So again, I think they're, we've reached out to them for help in designing what would need to be designed, but it would still be on us to buy whatever those improvements are, whether it's panels or I don't think it'll be carpeting. I think it'll be some panel system that addresses the echo.
So there's been one voice that said just balance it out, put it in roads, and urge the town to do this out of its own resources, so it wouldn't be increased Jeremiah's line and Andy. So we can say anything we want in this report, by the way, in terms of that we think Jeremiah, for example, out of his 750 ought to be able to find the money to do this, or we can explicitly add that 9,000. So I'm just saying we can get it down to 0 if we want and still express support for this being done while adding it to roads. Bridget.
I I I did a silly Google, which was how many potholes could $270,000 spend, but basically it's like $1,000 per pothole. So this is like 9 potholes that are sizable and go deep. So I guess it's just a trade-off. I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other because I can see the value in both.
Andy, then Jill.
I got the sense that the facilities budget was already less than he wanted. I think it was already cut before we got it. And if we're going to tell him to do something extra that he wasn't planning on, and we have the money, I think it's probably, again, it's $9,000. It's not a big deal either way, but it seems to me that if we're going to say do this, and then we have $9,000, it'd be worth saying,
Jill?
Here it is.
I'm also fine either way. I just think it's budget season, so giving them an item to work on for this year at that dollar amount should be something that they can incorporate into their budget as they're planning their work plan for the year. I don't think it's that out of the realm of possibility. And I think it sends a strong message to put these funds toward the roads as we're hearing so much about that.
All right, so I think the draft everyone saw mentions this and said if the money can be found, it would be a good idea. And I just am looking any way people want me to write this. I don't care, to tell you the truth. It always feels when people talk about participatory budgeting, the only place we have right now that residents can propose small things is JCPC. In theory, over in this new Transportation Advisory Commission, they'll be able to come with traffic calming, and in theory, they can apply to the Community Preservation Act, but it's rare that little projects get through over there. So if you think of it in this category of the town opened up the possibility of residents applying for things, it's a slightly different category. But as I said, I don't really care. So I just would like, it's 6:19. Anyone can tell me what we think we should do. It's written, the draft right now mentions this, and if funds can be supported, we think this is a good idea. We can balance out the budget by, again, making a sincere effort to get all the money we can to roads, say balance the whole budget out, put it all in roads, but make it one of the items that the facility manager wants to do. So we can write it any way we want. It's basically what I want. And then Paul is working with this, and does it stay in as a flagged item in the final report or not, the final capital improvement plan? So does anyone want, I hate to take this much time up on, as what everyone pointed out, if we're spending $4 or $5 million and we're down to 9,000. Deb.
I'm still going to say put it in roads, but I'm not going to oppose it if nobody thinks that's a good idea or
So what I can do is write this as balance it by showing a 0. So Sean can put in Sean is making sure the numbers always tally. So Sean will show 0 in the main table, and we can write it that we're assuming that the 9,000 went into roads, so roads goes up by 9,000 and change. We have, I don't know whether people succeeded in writing all the way to the end, but we said to the extent the closeout of the outstanding grants, projects, if money becomes available, when we start looking in the fall, roads should be at the top of the list. So we've named roads again at the end of the report if money becomes available. So we will have said roads several times, and that the road budget is falling short. And I just wrote a long paragraph for the council president in the testimony to talk about roads, so Sean can make that change in the sum. Well, everything is interactive when he does it. And so I think that closes that conversation. Is there any other project? Andy, go ahead.
I'm just wondering, do we have a figure? I know I had heard 6.4 million that is available for roads now, and I think it ended up being 5.7 million. But what's the number? And this is just separate from this discussion. I just want to know.
Yeah, so there's the 2.7 that was approved, and then there's 1.49 in chapter 90. And then right now, and how they structure the bid, this technically the money in this is not approved yet, right? But the money that we currently have here is 975,000, let's say, for road repairs when I add in the cash capital and then the other category. So whatever that adds up to, which is I think around 5 million.
And Sean didn't add, there's a line for sidewalks in there too. You
Yeah, I didn't
didn't
include
add,
sidewalks.
so if you go back to the spreadsheet, Andy, I tried to do that the weekend, but you just go in roads, sidewalks, and we can show the Excel again. But and then it's the additional 2.7 that just came from cash capital. So this is all looking at fiscal year 27, which starts, and you think about this, money becomes available for contracting over the summer. That's the amount of money. And DPW we haven't spent all of the current allocation yet either. But you pave roads and you do road repair, not in the middle of winter, so they go out for big bids. Does that answer your question, Andy, of how to add this up?
I guess, I mean, this adds up to 5.165 if I'm adding those numbers correctly. So 5.165 million plus the sidewalks. But that can't be spent till July 1st. So there's still money left over for them to spend during the spring and up until June. Is that right?
Yeah, they have some leftover money from last year's contracts that they bid out, that is basically subject to whatever they have left from prior years. And then the DPW is going to be making a good presentation. I think to TSO is where they're making that presentation, where they're going to explain go over the road index, talk about, the different conditions, but they also will go over the plan for what's going to be replaced with this money, which is about $5 billion worth of roads. So yes, there's going to be some spring work that's left over from prior contracts, and then there will be a new bid, which is going to be in the $5 million range.
And Andy, Sean, the 2.7 that came out of free cash, that's not time limited in terms of that could be spent before.
That could be, yeah, and even
that can be packaged sooner rather than
even the money in the capital plan can be subject to appropriation with bids. It's likely if we get a $5 million bid, they might not all get done this year anyway. So you can always do the bid subject to appropriation as well. We don't like to do that, but we have done that. We used to buy school buses that way because we wouldn't know what town meeting was going to do when we got approval, so we would do it subject to appropriation. So they're pretty good with the 5 million right now, bidding that out, which is what our target was for the first year of that plan.
Okay. Thanks.
And Andy, I think I put that number in the report, but I'll get the number from Sean for the section on how much we have to spend. And the tricky thing is JCPC is just looking at this one column. We're not also looking at the 2.7 that's coming from what the council just voted on. That's the extra from free cash. It's not in the budget we're looking, the next year budget. So there were a couple other items that I just wanted to draw people's attention to. And Sean is going to fix my numbers. I, toward the end of the report, point out that we're stressed in the next 4 years on the capital budget, and recommended that a few of the bigger ticket items that the town, to the extent they can, seek grants for them. So again, the town manager, that we're making any decisions other than this year, and he won't be either. So some of it was Bridget, was to re-examine the vehicle policy, because there are 2 years where in those 2 years we were buying a lot of vehicles, to really be thinking about, can we get that vehicle policy down? And I just pegged a number, it was $2.7 million worth of vehicles. Could we get it down to 1.5? Really trying to be, where can we squeeze more money out? So the report is written about squeeze more money out so that we have money for roads, and so that we have a balanced budget. And I don't know whether people had any edits in the report as you read on. So I'll stop, take a pause there. The other thing is I included the pie chart that Sean put together for us that shows the total spending, including the regional school debt, and Chapter 90. And I think that's a better pie chart than the chart that the town has typically done in the 5-year plan. So I was going to recommend that the town manager and the finance director use that in the final report. So it's showing the fact that we are spending something on Jones Library. It just happens to be in a debt service line. It didn't come out of cash this year. And it ends up looking more balanced, just because there are big ticket items that are in, like regional debt. Regional school capital didn't show up at all if we don't put regional schools in, and we are spending money on schools. So I think that's a healthier way long-term to show each year's capital budget. So that was a draft report you all received, whatever day, Monday morning. Sean started going through it to double check numbers. So I had some numbers that weren't quite right, because I didn't look at the fact that he'd redone the debt table. And Sean, you might want to bring up the debt service table so it's the last page of the draft report. And we don't have any control of that. That is through the miracles of our finance department. Some of the lines changed a lot from what we saw in February. And it's because when they went out for the bonds, the interest rates were lower. So the debt service went way down, and the Jones Library one went down by quite a bit. But that table is keeping a track of things that we are financing with debt. And at the very bottom of it, it says how much has to come out of general fund. Bridget, when you're looking at, when we raise new capital each year, how much is already going to be spent because we've incurred debt from a prior year, which is why trying not to incur debt when we can avoid it is good, because the next year we have to pay the debt. So it jumps up a lot when you go out, when the DPW building comes online, assuming that we can finance the DPW building at 35 million, which is a number we've just put in. We don't even know that that's a real number yet. So when we go out over time, there's going to be less and less each year for a JCPC to look at in terms of what money is available, because debt service will be taking over bigger shares. And
Kathy, can I just add real quick? And like the bond anticipation note interest estimate for FY 27, I might be able to reduce that a little bit. When we first did this, we hadn't borrowed money yet, so we were still not sure what our interest rate would be and what the cost would be next year. We now know that. So if I reduce that for the final plan, I think the direction I've heard from this committee is put it into roads if that
Yeah.
lowers the cost. But the other numbers up above, for the most part, are set now that we have our financing in place.
And if people who know the regional school long-term capital plan, Sean has penciled in a million, and a million going out a few years. The last time I saw regional school, the number was bigger than that. So that is, these are driven by decisions. JCP is not making those decisions, but the towns are making those decisions. So all of that affects what we can spend on everything else. So I just wanted to make sure people knew that table was there, because it's a little complicated, but it shows you why buying a ladder truck has a long-term consequence, because it was an over $1 million purchase. So it's with us for a long time. The year we bought it, we didn't have the money to do it.
And right now, there's a bunch of Crocker Farm projects that are, bigger ticket items with the roof and the playground and HVAC and fire alarm. Right now, they're bundled just for simplicity's sake because they're in out years. And then same thing with Puffer's Pond. So right now, besides the DPW, the only other projects that are in this plan projected to be funded with a borrowing are those two.
And as Shannon said, that she wants to do a full building look of Crocker. Those numbers are placeholders right now. We don't actually know what those numbers are and whether they are, assuming that you go for the school co-funding, and this is the net of the town. So all of this is taxpayer dollars is the other way of looking at it.
And it may look like we have a lot of debt, but for a long time this looked really good. So, before we started these building projects, this looked really good, and now we're at that place. Which we knew was going to happen was once we start taking on the building project, 2 buildings, and now we'll eventually have a third when Public Works gets going. We knew this was going to increase, and we're just catching up to where a lot of other towns are.
Andy.
I'm just looking at the bottom 2 green lines, the water enterprise fund debt and the sewer enterprise fund debt. That's debt that we'll be paying, but we'll be paying it with the enterprise fund revenues, right? So
yeah, long term, and maybe next year if I can if I can do it. The one recommendation from this committee for a while has been to incorporate enterprise fund capital into this process. We haven't quite done that, but this schedule, we want to include all the debt. So yeah, those are capital projects that are in the enterprise funds that are funded by the water and sewer rates. So like Centennial is in the water fund. Gravity Belt was a big project we did in the sewer fund, which make up the most of those numbers.
And we don't know yet, Andy. There was a discussion just at the beginning of last year's council meeting on the treatment plant and the extraordinary expense because it's falling apart, and we don't know yet what that is. So that's not yet there, and that's enterprise fund. So future sewer enterprise fund,
but we
do increases.
We do have funding for capital improvements and system improvements regularly. It's just, is that report going to come back with a number that's much bigger than what we currently invest in it, or say we need to replace the whole system? That would be a big number.
So if are there any other comments or questions on the draft report? And this is what I will commit to doing, and I will share it back to everyone, is I will write a longer section in the middle of it on a potential road policy. Here's vehicle purchase policy. In the middle of it, here's the beginning ideas, and with a strong recommendation at the very beginning to call a meeting together to come up with one that governs replacement, and to come up with definitions. I think also I heard is what is fair and good, when we're rating a vehicle, what is the criteria being used for those ratings? Some kind of repair history, what it looks like. So if people will trust that I will do that, well, I will share the report back. I don't have to get it right away to the town manager, and I can send a revised version with some corrected numbers in it. But what I'd like to see if people are comfortable enough with it, with those changes, to vote on it so we don't have to meet again next week. Otherwise, we would need to meet next week. So the vehicle, one less police car is in it. That's been changed. We will write a section that's stronger on vehicle purchase in the middle of it. And otherwise, there aren't many significant changes from what you saw that you got 3 days ago. Deb.
I am not going to vote for another meeting.
Kim, do you need a motion, Kathy?
I need a motion to approve the report as amended. With the edits and changes as discussed during the meeting. Yeah.
Okay, I can move that. I move
Okay.
that we accept the edited JCPC report with adaptations as discussed in the meeting of March 25th. That's it, I think. Yeah.
Is there a second?
I
Second,
second.
Okay. I will put it to a vote then. Bridget.
Yes.
Kathy is a yes. Eugene.
Yes.
Deb.
yes.
Andy.
Yes.
Jill.
Yes.
And Lee.
Yes.
And what I will do is I will make these changes, and this is a process we've used in the finance committee. If it's okay with people, I'll make the changes. I'll send them out. And if there are any last minute edits, like the word choice isn't quite right, as long as it's minor and not substantive, I'll incorporate them in and ask you just to send them back to me. And the report then goes to the town manager. We submit it to him, and we send it to the council just as a courtesy. It's not a discussed report. And usually I write a 1-page summary of the longer report, because then it goes into the capital planning. And Sean, one of the things at the end of this report, I noticed that the Northampton capital plan includes this section at the very end that talks about enterprise funds. So I didn't think that JCPC would have to talk about it, but just when the town manager talked about capital, there's general fund capital and there's enterprise fund. So I just thought that was a good way for the public to see it. And I don't know whether you can do that next year or this year, but I just thought you could see the kinds of investments that the town is making, regardless of what the source of the money is. So it wasn't that we would start reviewing enterprise funds. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think we just got to a closing point. Yes. And so I do need minutes. So a couple people were drafting minutes from different meetings. I'll figure out how we capture this. Maybe someone can do a quick report of today's minutes, so we capture this one, because we don't have a minute taker for today. And I can't think of what else. So we will place this edited report also in today's packet once I get it done. Once I get it done, so we'll have a record of it, the final one. Deb.
There is no packet today.
There wasn't any packet for today, probably because the draft report
didn't make it. Okay.
Didn't make it. That was the only change for today. So we can put.
I can put it in, Kathy. If once the updates are put in, I can add it to the packet today.
Right. Particularly because Sean picked up a couple of things where the numbers were just wrong, so we didn't post it.
Okay.
So I am supposed to think of terms of public comment. I can't just adjourn. So we do have a member of the public. This is a time, if you would like to make a public comment, we welcome any public comments. And a hand didn't go up. So I will make a motion to adjourn unless there are further comments. Andy.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you, Kathy, for running the team, and I really wanted to thank Sean for all his work in helping us understand this and showing us the effects of different changes. So appreciate the group and the process and the help.
Lee.
I want to join Andy. Really, thank you. And Sean, both for, it's amazing. Thank you.
As people said, they're new to the
Kathy
committee.
doesn't need me anymore. She's been doing this for so many years. She could do this without me if she wanted to. So,
but the worst thing is trying to find. Didn't we already fund that? So Bridget, when someone said, "Didn't we fund the Crocker?" I said, "I'm sure we voted on that." At what point did we fund it? So, now I personally love the JCP process because even if, Jill, when you're feeling like most of it has been decided, that's so much better than trying to trade off things where we don't have enough information, but you get to see what the capital needs of the town are. And it's a real eye-opener every year on how hard it is to juggle the different needs. And you think of what's not being asked for. And I'm kind of cringing with Dave Zomax going out and raising awareness of all the wonderful things we could do with Puffer's Pond. The only problem is it's another $5 million. And, so it's we need to dredge it. We don't want it to overflow, but these are such big ticket items compared to our sources of revenue, unless the state starts kicking in. So I loved the JCP process just because I learned so much about what Shannon brought to us, I never would have thought of. So I thank you all, and I thank all the people who come and spend time with us. And so I'm going to make a motion to adjourn and thank you all for being here. And I think it's seconded, so I'll just do it to a quick vote. Kathy says yes. Eugene?
Yes.
Bridget?
Yes, and thank you.
Deb?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Jill?
Yes, and thank you, everyone.
And Lee. And I do thank you for pushing us hard on vehicle policy. It will strengthen the report to put that section in. We are adjourned at 6:43. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.